Mrs. Francis Levy. He can't be here tonight, but he's the co-director of the Philoctetes Center, along with Dr. Edward Necessian. Tonight we are extremely pleased to have our last in our series of Living in the Musical Moment, Don Byron and Lewis Porter. Jazz is the discipline of improvisation is developed in jazz at a very high level, and tonight Dr. Porter will explore jazz improvisation with award-winning clarinetist, saxophonist, and composer Don Byron. The presentation will consist of performances of short improvised pieces followed by discussion, and we will start now with Mr. Porter and Mr. Byron. Thank you.
That's the first time we ever played together. Right, Don?
What, you playing piano?
Why, did we play before?
I thought we made a record.
Did we do something with me when I was playing in my alto saxophone days?
Didn't we make a record with like Lawrence Schoenberg and those cats from Connecticut?
Matt Glazer, was he on it?
No.
Violin player? I think that's the first time we played. Well, okay, first time we played together with me on the piano. That's significant. It's different. Piano's my main instrument, but for a long time I was playing the alto as well. And then for a while I was focusing on the alto, and then I said, screw the alto, and I went back to the piano. That's a short story of my life. And Don and I have known each other for 30 years. That's before he was born. And when I was about 3. But it was 30 years. It was 1978. Well, I know that because that's when Rand Blake asked me to come and speak to his class. So, and that's when I met you. So that's why I know that what year it had to be, you know. And but as I say, we've known each other on and off. You know, the years would go by, we haven't had any contact. But lately, we did something at Lincoln Center, and so now we're doing this. And the Lincoln Center thing was a panel discussion, so that was our first playing. So the question, my dear Mr. Byron, that I'd like to discuss with them first is, since we've never played together as a duo with me on the piano before, what is it that we just did? What did we do? And how could we have done that? How is it possible to do that?
Well, I think when you improvise freely is maybe when you encounter a person's education the most directly. Because most of the things that someone plays are kind of out of people's subconscious.
Right.
But aside from the fact that maybe the impulses are out of the subconscious, I think the things that you play are really out of a kind of book learning space.
Interesting.
Most of the time. You know, I mean, there's a school of free improvisers that's more kind of, there are more energy players, and
right.
They just kind of make kind of a constant racket. And you know, and sometimes I play with people who play like that. And,
yeah, I do too.
But mostly, I don't exactly play like that.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you say that. So what we did is we just played free, especially because we haven't done this before. That's a nice way to kind of get to know each other musically a little bit, you know. So kind of just reacting to what each other does and thinking and listening. But it's interesting you said that, because when I play, for example, with Daniel Carter, I've done a bunch of gigs with, what did he call me? He called me a structuralist. And what he meant is that we'll be playing with a group of people doing free improvisation. Maybe some of them are doing stuff like this, but I'll always be like trying to put a pattern to it, Now he happens to like that. There are people who wouldn't. There are people who would say, well, I just want it to be chaotic sounding, you know. But he likes that I do it. He says he feels like a singer, and I'm making his accompaniment up, you know. So that's one way to think about it, I guess.
Well, I mean, you know, I'm one of those people that don't make derogatory kind of comments about people that play different, and kind of try to figure out what it is that they play. And,
right.
You know, all of that kind of post-Cecil Taylor playing does have a kind of pattern to it.
Yes.
It has a kind of pattern to it. It's very pianistic, and, you know, it's related to like a lot of kind of second Viennese 1950s kind of music. It's not just, especially from him in particular,
from Cecil.
It's not just, it's not completely random.
Absolutely not. I mean, like with Cecil, a lot of times he'll start with, I'll put a piano sound in here for a second, but he'll work on something for a while, you know, like he'll start with, he'll work on, so you can hear that there's a certain idea that he's working on. He'll do that a lot, and people say, oh, he's just banging around, so they're really kind of missing it if they think that. And also another thing about people on the free improv scene, I've noticed, probably you'd agree with me, Don, is that which also is an indication that there's more going on than just, flailing around on your instrument, is that they have very strong ideas about what they like and what they don't like, and whether a session went well, or whether, very strong ideas. And certain cats that they just can't work with, and other cats that really understand them. So it's that totally goes against the idea that people have that it's more or less random, But in any case, I always say humans don't do random. That's what you need computers for, Humans can't actually do random. That's not what humans are about anyway. You can't generate random numbers. They don't ask humans to do that because humans can't do that. You have to get a computer because humans, as soon as you say one number, you go, that reminds me of another one. So it's not random, you see. What else? Something else you wanted to know about our first duet that you just heard before? Yes, ma'am. Barbara's a pianist herself, by the way.
But, the Bach Beethoven thing. I'm just learning about this. Does somebody take the lead first and then it goes back and forth, or do you start out with no particular person?
I don't know. What do you think, Don? I mean, in this case, I did start. I kind of jumped in.
I don't think there's any set anything about it.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
It's just he just happened to start first.
But there is.
I didn't even mean about starting first, but having an idea that you respond to and then you respond, or.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
All right, let me say something about this. I started with something, I don't know remember exactly, but let's say something like this. Now, that actually has a pulse to it. Somewhere in my mind I was thinking 1, 2, 3, 4. And then as Don played, I was listening to him. It was clear that he wasn't necessarily wanting to be doing 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's an example of the kind of exchange that goes on. So I heard that. I went, all right, fine, because you can also take your foot away from this. And then you can let it float a little more. So that's an example of interaction that happened there that I was aware of, while we were playing.
I don't remember that.
I probably just made it up, but when we listen to the recording later, we'll find out. Yes, ma'am.
Is it fair to say that what you're doing is really just having a conversation musically? And then if it is, then just as people have conversations, one person can be more dominant or ignore the other person and override what you're doing. I mean, does it have all the dynamics of human verbal conversation? It's the same.
I don't usually ignore people while I talk to them. Unless it's my parents,
You can tune out your own.
Yeah, well, yeah, you could. I guess more tune out might be more accurate. Like sometimes I hear people doing this kind of thing, and I feel like it really wouldn't matter who was next to them, that they would do the same thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Especially the guys that play like.
That's
like
right.
Is like la 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 with this guy and la 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 with that guy. There's not really that much difference.
Right.
That's not completely true, because maybe the dialogue is about the energy and not about the content. Maybe with some people they're always going to play the same thing, but the energy that they put into it, that goes into the phrasing, is maybe the point of interaction.
Okay.
Maybe. I mean, we're just talking hypothetically now.
Right.
But there are some great kind of collaborations between, say, like a horn player and a drummer, like between John Coltrane and Elvin Jones, where it's not. The interaction isn't like you play rat-tat-tat and then the other person plays rat-tat-tat back. It's not really. It's a little more processed,
right,
than repetition. On the other hand, I played. One of the drummers I played with is a guy Ralph Peterson, who can really, you could play a very long phrase and he'd figure out what you were playing and where you were going to end.
Right, yeah.
And there's a certain school of interaction that's very concrete. And they're all just different. You know, a guy like Jack DeJohnette is more processing things.
Right.
And then there's people with such crazy ideas that they're always leading, which maybe you put Tony Williams in that kind of category where, like, if he's playing, he's kind of leading what's going on.
Yeah.
So, you know, really depends.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we were having a conversation. It definitely is a conversation. And people are very interested in making analogies with spoken conversation, but there's a lot of ways where you can't compare it to spoken conversation. One of them is because you're doing it you're playing at the same time. You don't always go back and forth. So, I mean, maybe that's like some spoken conversations, but that right away makes it very different. And the second is this whole thing that Don brought up, this idea about whether you imitate each other or whether you don't go there, so to speak. And in spoken conversation, that's not even something you normally would think of. You normally would say, should I copy what that person just said to me? You know, that's not one of the options unless you're really trying to irritate somebody. You know, that's not usually even one of the options. But musically, it can be because imitation is a part of a lot. You know. You know, that's a very. What's that?
I meant more of a dialogue.
Oh, I'm not talking about what you meant, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what you meant. I'm just explaining how there are differences between. He was talking about repetition as an example of something that you maybe don't want to do, and I'm saying these are some ways in which musical conversation is very different, I think, from spoken conversation, even though it is definitely a kind of conversing. Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, one comment is that it seems like you guys were really about content and not energy. And
well, we'll get there. That's only our first number.
What I really mean by that is that, and tell me if or not it's all about it. Sound is very important. Sound is very important to each one of you. So you're listening to what the other ones are playing, what the other person is playing, and then whether or not you repeat it or do something entirely different, you're still looking to build on that sound to create something nonetheless.
I was aware of that anyway, yeah. What do you think?
I'll take that.
He'll take it. And the pitches and the actual notes.
Right.
You know, not just in a general way, but in a very specific way.
Right.
You know. Because there's this phenomenon of perfect pitch. You know, I don't have that. Do you have perfect pitch, Tom?
I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Well, no, you would know because you'd say, that's an E flat, you know.
Sometimes I have it and sometimes I don't.
Okay.
But, I mean, you know, when you're playing, if you play an instrument and you're connected to it, you kind of have pitch through an instrument.
That's what I was going to say, is that while I'm playing, you notice I can hear sometimes, oh, that's the note he played. Even jumping around, I say, oh, that's what he played. And I don't know that I could do it if you just sat me down cold.
Right.
But in the process of playing, you're relating things to each other, and you kind of can hear relationships, you know. So you surprise yourself sometimes. Yes, sir.
Do you really need to hear the relationship if you're improvising and you're jumping off using dissonance? Even if you play the wrong note, you're jumping to the next right one.
Well, what do you think?
You know, there's a lot of information in what you just said, and I think some of it I don't agree with. Because, you know, where I sit, you know, a dissonant thing, you know, it's not whether things are like dissonant or not dissonant. You know, as a player, you measure how dissonant you want to be. If you're playing a major sound, a major seventh is a little more dissonant than a major sixth. It's a little more dissonant than a major third. Like, all of those things are relatively more or less dissonant, and those are within the normal bounds of major and minor. So that you're, you know, using, you know, that you're saying that dissonance means it doesn't matter what you play. I can't really feel that.
Yeah.
Well, but if you're
And
doing
this,
atonally-
the other thing I think maybe he's reacted to that I also did in my mind too is the idea that there's a wrong note and a right note. It does happen sometimes that you'll really hit something that was not what you were thinking of, but it happens less and less as you have more experience improvising, really, to be honest, you know. It's less and less that happens. You really have an idea where you're going and what you're doing on your instrument. In fact, Don referred to it at the very beginning, this whole idea that you have a lot of experience and information, and you kind of, you know, so that's not really as common as people think. In fact, I don't know if you noticed this, Don. To me, one of the things I always say is the critics don't know from nothing. But one of the reasons you can tell is it's a very common thing in reviews of performances for them to say he hit a wrong note, but then he went somewhere else and made it sound okay. And invariably, if you had been there and heard that performance, and sometimes I have been, I guarantee it was not a wrong note. That's many times that's a layperson's ideas that will hit wrong notes and then make them sound better. But hopefully, by the time you're performing in public for a while, that's not really what's going on, you see. But you were going to salvage yourself.
If you're playing atonally, where you're not really playing in any key and you're jumping from minor, you know, all over the place.
But maybe atonally means that there's two keys.
Yeah.
Maybe it means that there's snatches of this key and snatches of that key. You know, atonal can mean a lot of things. You know, Schoenberg is atonal and Stravinsky is atonal, quote unquote, but they go about it in very different ways.
Very different. Yeah.
And you know, I think, you know, a modern jazz perspective on atonality has more to do with the Stravinsky way of doing things, that you have you have relationships between different keys that produce interesting effects, some of which are consonant and some of which are dissonant.
Right, yeah.
You kind of move through them.
It may be that you have possibly more options in an atonal context, but it doesn't mean every option, or it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter what you play. But you're still making relationships, rhythmic relationships, pitch relationships, you know. Yes, ma'am.
Does the fact that the keyboard has fixed pitches influence the way you improvise? Because I know, for instance, if a violinist is playing a sonata with a pianist, he has to decide whether the E sharp is going to be closer to the F or closer to the E, whereas the pianist has no choice. So does that play into this?
Well, you know, obviously if you're playing with a trombone player, you might want to play some more slidey things. You know, if you're playing with or someone that plays a string instrument, then you're going to be hearing more slidey things, whereas, you know, on a keyboard most of the time you wouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're talking from my perspective, you know, what the input is kind of is the big variable. So, like, I guess, you know, if the piano was out of tune, that would be another thing. Or if it was microtonally tuned, that would be another thing. Or, you know, all of those things could happen if you had a pianist that had strings prepared or something like that, which some people play like that. You know, that would be another kind of sound that you would hear that might change what the output might be.
By the way, on a synthesizer, you can do that, which is cheating. Now, should we? Are you in the mood to do your that lefty number of yours?
Okay.
You want to try that?
Okay.
And how about you want to play it and then tell them where you came up with that title, or you want to do that first?
This is from a film score to. It's a film called Strange Fruit, which was it was on POV a couple seasons ago, and what it was about was the song Strange Fruit and the genesis of it being written and all the arguments over who wrote it. And at this point in the film, there's an older couple. They're an older kind of Jewish couple that used to be in the teachers' union in the 50s and 40s, you know, kind of liberal institution. And there were a lot of people that were interested in these kinds of things. And they were people that used to go to Cafe Society, and they were members of the Communist Party. You know, they were a certain type of person. And at the point that this music comes in, they're kind of arguing on camera about when they first heard the song, but maybe in a way that kind of like if you were watching it, it made you a little uncomfortable. You know, like you see these older couples and they just don't care about arguing in public. So they're just kind of going at it. No, it wasn't Tuesday, it was Wednesday. And so I kind of decided to put something behind them that gave them kind of an Edith and Archie Bunker kind of feeling to it. Just, you know, so I made kind of a standard tune and I made kind of a stridey accompaniment to it, and, you know, just a piece of 9 to 5 film writing, really.
I love it.
So
I love it. And what's it called?
It's called Lefty Teachers at Home. I mean, that was what it said on the cue sheet. So
that is what it said.
It's what it said on the cue sheet. It said Lefty Teachers at Home. So like, I just left it like that. You know.
That's great. I love it.
People thought it was ours, or were they left-handed, or, you know. They weren't left-handed.
So wait, they're arguing while you hear that in the background?
Not like horribly arguing.
Not arguing, but okay.
They're just like, no, you're wrong. No, I mean, it's a little embarrassing. But who hasn't been out with a couple that embarrasses themselves and they don't really care? You know what I mean? Like it's just like, you forgot your medicine. You're no good. I hate you. That kind of thing.
I love it, but I love that tune. Now, see, that's a different situation. What was the basis, if you don't mind my getting teachery, but that is part of the idea. What is the basis of that composition? That's not a free, total, what you call a free improvisation.
Standard tunes, the way that they were written back when they were standard tunes.
So he gave me a sheet with a tune on it, and we based our improvisation on this, with the chords and the melody.
I mean, if you see, Gershwin sheet music in a certain period, it's basically stride piano written out. So it's kind of like that, but not exactly like that.
Oh, maybe I better say, if you don't know what stride piano, it's this sound that he had going on here. This. And the idea is, if you do it with one hand, this is a two-hand version. If you do it with one hand, your hand is jumping around like this. It's striding around. It's with it.
You're playing both the bass and the chords all in one hand.
Right.
So, but I mean, like in the early days, before the 50s, that's the way Count Basie played. He played kind of stride piano. You'd see his left hand would just be going, but, amazingly, like hitting all the right bass notes and all the right chord notes as they go through the chord changes of the song.
The guys who are really good at that are really unbelievable. I always joke about Art Tatum. I always say he probably took phone calls while he kept this going with it. At really fast tempos. You're kind of going boom, boom, boom. He probably said, "Oh, I can't talk now. I'm making a recording." He's unbelievable.
Well, most of those guys could smoke a cigarette while they did that.
That's true. That's true.
I've seen lots of
It's true. Any other question about that?
Yeah, this was a composition.
Right.
You had music from that composition as well, and you were playing off of it, or you were just playing off of what he...
Oh, okay. All of the above. The usual thing in jazz, it's fairly standard. Doesn't have to be this way, but the most common thing is you start and end close to what the written composition is, and in the middle you're a lot more free. So that's basically what we did. Now, you notice he started by himself, but this one I have heard the record. So I know on the record he starts by himself, and what you do is I kind of heard when he starts to go into the tune, and I said, all right, now he's playing the part that's on here. You see what I mean? And start playing the chords to it. And then towards the middle you can be more free, and then towards the end you kind of have a sense of coming back home to it. Does that help?
It helps, but for the listener, for me in particular, I have trouble hearing where things are going.
Yes. The thing about that, in my experience, and this is what we just did, is much more traditional than the first number, but in my experience, it helps if you know the tune. So it's very difficult if you don't. For this kind of thing, if you're just starting to hear jazz, the best thing is pick improvisations on tunes you know, or have a recording of an improvisation of a performance and listen to it enough that you get to recognize the tune. But it's true, until you know the tune, then you can kind of hear your way through the format of it.
Let's play a ballad.
Yeah, speaking of tunes they know, some people might know this, because should we just play it? Is that what you're thinking? Yeah. All right. Was that, did some of you recognize that that was based on an old song? Oh, very good. How many people recognized that it was based on Body and Soul? A lot of you did. Yes, sir.
A lot of people of my age learned something about jazz from Coleman Hawkins.
Okay.
It's about 1940.
1939, right? Yeah.
But what I didn't get was the first piece that you See, this sort of thing is traditional jazz to me.
Yeah.
And so was your previous piece.
Okay.
But when you played the first piece, which was free, I think.
Right.
What I wanted to know was, were you working off, as you were on this tune, a harmonic progression chords, working within chords that were established, written down?
No.
And you were written them?
No, because free is free. Free is free. Yeah.
Both melody and harmony.
Free is free. When we say free, we really mean free. Yeah,
Okay.
we really do. Now that doesn't mean you couldn't. This is something also that might as well know. It doesn't mean we couldn't say we're going to improvise free, and that it couldn't come out to have chords in it, but they wouldn't be chords that we pre-agreed upon. Okay. Yes, ma'am. And I know you had a question before. I haven't forgotten. If you want to bring it up.
To me,
Yes.
that's tennis without a net.
Well, okay.
Well, don't go to hear that kind of music because you don't like it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of music in the world. My feeling is, why, if there's only certain music that you like, or certain music that a certain person likes, if that's all the music there was, then, you know what I mean?
No.
If there was only one right way to... I mean, Bach is great. If everybody agreed that that was the greatest that music could possibly be and the only way that you should do it, then music would have stopped changing a long time ago. So there's going to be a lot of music in the world that's not for everybody. That's cool with me, too. Yeah.
I have a friend who listens to, at work, who listens to a lot of jazz. He says that if he can tell where they're going for the next note or so, he loses interest. But I'm curious. Now, you said you know where you're going. Is there a tipping point, or how much do you have to know where this gentleman is going, and vice versa? How
Wait,
much
first
do you
of all-
have to know where this gentleman is going?
First of all, I don't remember saying that I know where I'm going. But I don't think I said or meant that. But there is something, maybe this is what you're thinking of, which is that you're thinking very hard. One reason I love making music is because it's your body and your mind and your emotions all working very hard. And at its best, you're working as hard as you've ever worked with all three of them. And so you are thinking very hard is one of the things you're doing, and you're hearing what you're playing, and it makes you think of other sounds. It's not a verbal thinking so much for me, but it's most of the time you're hearing the sound you're playing, and that does lead you to another sound. But it doesn't mean that that you know it much in advance, maybe a split second before you hit the note. Not more than. I mean, you'd have to measure it with a neurological apparatus. It's probably millionth of a second or something. What do you think about that, Don?
I'm lost. I was just about to clean my glasses.
Well, go ahead and clean them. We'll see what... did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering how much that holds up when you're playing free, as opposed to playing something like a ballad.
I see what you're saying.
Really hearing the notes before you play them, or is it more of a, I don't know. I mean, when I've tried playing free, I've never been able to hear what I'm playing if it's not in the scale.
Yeah. Usually I have a pretty good sense of what I'm doing, but I've been playing free, I don't know, since I was, practically since I started the piano. I mean, since I was about maybe 15, something like that. I mean, I made a recording of myself playing free. I still have it when I was 15, playing free stuff. So, I mean, when you've been doing it for, not to give any indication that I'm much older than 15 now, but when you've been doing it for some years, you have a pretty good sense of what the sounds are that, if you put your hand here, what's going to come out. I think. What do you think?
I think it depends on the kind of free and the kind of, some people play free and it's very notey, and it's very, there's like a couple recordings with Ornette, and he's playing with Freddie Hubbard. Right. And Freddie Hubbard never stops playing chord changes. Some people play free and they never stop playing chord changes. Some people play free and it's very, like you can tell that they want everybody to know that they're great musicians and they know all the intervals and all the chords, and that in a way that has less to do with chord changes, that can be a way of playing free. And then some people, it's just energy. Like if you were around in the 70s when they had the loft scene and all of those guys were playing, it was more like an energy kind of thing. Like kind of an angry, rebellious, like a lot of music in the 60s and 70s. It was, it had that kind of energy to it.
Right.
It really depends on the crew. There's some people that I played that kind of music with that I really don't like playing it. In general, I'm not going to stand up for it and say everybody should like it, because it's not really what I do. It's like it's as a working musician, it's something you ought to know how to do.
Yeah.
The same, people think, being a working musician means you can play a little blues and some straight ahead jazz. I think you should be able to play some Latin. You should be able to play some free.
Right.
You should be able to, you should be able to function in a lot of ways. And considering that there's money to be made everywhere, why not make it?
Not a lot.
Well,
Don't
I don't
get
know.
excited.
Like one guy that I've known for a long time is this guy named Hill Green.
Yeah, sure.
And he
I
plays
played
with Little Jimmy Scott.
That's right. The
And
singer,
he plays with Charles Gale,
which is way out.
which is like way out there. You know what I mean? You can put together any group of skills you want to. You can be like Bo Jackson or Deion Sanders. You can put together a lot of different things, and it's really a style.
Yeah.
And when you get to know people that play, everything from straight ahead music to free music, I mean, there's a lot of variations within that. The way Art Blakey plays and the way, Bill Evans plays, they have different feelings and there's different ground rules, and you just get to know what people expect, and you try to fulfill that expectation, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. And also about that question of do you always know what's going to sound like? I mean, sometimes it is, like you were saying, sometimes it is more or less a texture. So this kind of thing is more or less a texture. So there, it's not so much that you're thinking, E flat, A flat, B flat, C, but it's just you kind of know you have an idea of a sound that you want, and you're experienced enough that you know how to get that sound, but you're not necessarily, when you do that, you're not necessarily thinking one pitch at a time. And sometimes you do this. You're definitely not thinking, I want to make sure I have B natural in there, But, so, it also depends what it is you're working with. But the more experience, at least you have an idea of what sound is going to come out when you hit the instrument. You shouldn't be totally shocked, I guess I'm saying. You should be pleasantly surprised. Seriously, that's more. Sometimes you're pleasantly surprised because it's just really what you wanted, and it wasn't easy to do, and you feel so good that it happened. That's what I mean by pleasantly surprised. Whereas shocked is, what did I just do? Why did I do that? I don't know what I'm doing. That would be pleasantly surprised is a feeling that you really achieved what you wanted to, and it wasn't easy, and you're so glad that it came out that way. Does that make any sense?
Okay, I'll take that.
Sometimes you do feel that way when you improvise it. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm back to that towards the end. It sounds like you're talking about what's going to happen next. It's like a process. So I keep thinking like I'm more visual.
Go ahead.
Jackson Pollock.
Okay.
He has an idea what he's going to do, but it really doesn't quite know where it's going to go, and it just sort of evolves into something.
Yeah. Okay.
So is that as musicians, if you had to compare yourself to the visuals, is that fair to even do it? And if so, who would it be? Who would it be with? Would it be like Jackson Pollock? Free jazz?
Free jazz, but again, I don't feel like particularly represented by free jazz, so I wouldn't say that about myself. But if I was playing that kind of music, that might be, when I'm playing that kind of music, maybe that would be a thing that I'm thinking of. And a lot of painters that paint that style, they listen to that kind of stuff. If I think about playing more chordal music, then I might think of something that's a little more representational than that.
Hopper.
Well, maybe more French Impressionist.
Okay.
Maybe.
We'll put a few. Hopper's more like we'll put a French Impressionist one. But the Jackson Pollock process, I can see what you mean. Let me put it this way. Because he'll spell something on the canvas, then he'll react to that. The next thing he does is kind of a reaction to that, to what he just did. So in that sense, I can see the analogy that you're kind of reacting to what each thing is a reaction to the thing you just did. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to sound like a purist, and I'm not.
That's okay.
But I am a musician, and my daughter plays jazz. I was just at the the Stone.
You were just where?
At the Stone last night and heard her play with it.
What's her name?
Rachel Garnier. She was playing with the Marvin Sewell group.
Oh, great.
These are kind of in between.
I know Marvin Sewell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hard to categorize. Well, I took objection very early on this evening. That is not a piano. And,
Did we say it was?
yeah, you said it's a piano. It's the first time I played together with on a
Oh,
piano.
right. It's a
And-
synthesizer.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important because in the club jazz scene, there has been a real resurgence of real pianos, and there is completely different inputs into tone when somebody's playing piano.
Sure.
I mean, she took up the accordion rather than play a synthesizer because she was one of the first people who did that. Just out of preference, she just didn't, she couldn't think the sound. But
Right.
my other point, which is I think a point that non-musicians don't realize how much we musicians think with our bodies. So you have a certain body picture, a sound. You measure intervals. You're in something. You're in a space.
Right.
And it's on your instrument. I know different instruments have different, figurations of winds. You break in different places, but still, your hands, your breath, everything is inside of something. It's never just totally abstract.
Sure.
I think the Jackson Pollock.
That's why I said it's physical, it's emotional, and it's intellectual. And but I'm not sure if you meant the purist about the piano. At home, I have a Steinway, right? That's my favorite instrument. But Steinway can't do that, and I like it. I don't see anything wrong with that because now I have 1,000 instruments plus I have my Steinway. But guess what? There's no Steinway at the Philocrates Center. If there were, I'd be playing it.
We're in the market for an upright piano to have at the center.
Is that right?
You know what? Let us know.
Okay.
If anybody wants to sell their upright...
That's Edwin Nasserian. He's one of the directors here, Dr. Nasserian. All right. See, now you know something. So I'm actually not a purist because you can have so much fun with this. I have the greatest time of my life. But where there is a piano, I usually don't bring this. Yes, sir?
Yeah, as I say, I'm really new to this, and I'm a pianist, but I heard Herbie Hancock and Lionel Levy Monday.
Oh, yeah, you did? You went to that? Where was that? At Carnegie Hall. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure it was.
I know it's better not to criticize anybody, but
No, go ahead.
Herbie Hancock was sort of dull, and this guitarist, whom I had never heard of before, played the guitar in such a way he could make it sound like a piano.
It sounds like a piano, that's right.
In a way, it made Hancock sound superfluous when they were
That's
there.
interesting.
No, but seriously, it was the most amazing guitar.
He has a very pianistic sound. He's from Africa, I forget where. Lueke. L-O-U-E-K-E. And Hancock was playing an acoustic piano or electric or synthesizer.
A nice, big, beautiful piano.
He was, okay.
And,
Though, yeah, well, that's a whole other thing. Just one, I don't know, anything, did you have any commentary on that at all?
Well, you liked apples better than oranges that night.
I guess so.
I think Herbie Hancock's a great piano player.
I love Herbie.
I'd probably want to hear him before most people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a handful of piano players that I think are pretty interesting, but, most of them are playing out of the space that he invented. So I have a lot of respect for him. But, Lionel is an interesting musician, no question.
Yeah, I love what he does. Now, what do you think of my tune called Gamelan? You want to do that, right?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, when you're playing free and with other people and you don't exactly know where you're going, how do you know when you're ending? I mean, how do you know when it's time to play down?
What do you think?
You just feel the energy winding down and, maybe you end together exactly and maybe you don't. But you can feel a piece winding down, like a lot of the old classical composers would write their climax to something called the golden mean,
right?
It's a kind of a proportional. It's about 2/3 of the way through a piece, and there is some evidence that dramatically, maybe a Shakespeare play peaks at the golden mean and whatever, and then things dissipate. So you can feel that, there's nothing worse than playing with somebody that just keeps playing.
That happens.
Just keeps man.
It happens.
You should have stopped a long time ago. There's a lot of that on the free scene, actually. But I've heard straight ahead players that play too long too. You can, I mean, I don't want to, I'm not mentioning any names, but there's certain people that play too long, or some people that play a long time and you like it, like Coltrane.
Coltrane always sounds
played
great.
A long time, but you like it.
That sounds pretty. But it's true, and that has to do with the conversation thing too. I know I've been in situations where I really felt the other person was just playing, hogging the whole. They're playing so long that I said, what, I just want to end it. I don't even want to play after that because they didn't leave enough time for anybody else. So it does happen sometimes. That the communication isn't so great. Let's play some more, then we'll talk some more. Here's a different kind of improvisational basis. It's just a melodic line that I wrote, and I've done this. Those of you who've been to the previous ones, this is one that I do at each one because I like to see how it sounds with different people. I call it gamelan. It's based on a scale that is used in Indonesian gamelan music and in Indian music. This is the scale. I just happen to really love that scale, so I wrote a melodic line using that scale. And then after that, we just kind of play and see what happens. I won't even keep this beat going the whole time, just to start it up, One, two. They asked me, did I like how he played on my piece just then? I love it. That piece is very interactive, see? That piece is very interactive, because the whole idea is not to get caught up in this is my solo, this is your solo. And Don got that right away. You know, he just, right? Did you get that? It sounded like you did.
Sometimes I accompanied, sometimes I played.
Yeah, like a flexible back and forth kind of a thing. Not like, oh, this is my solo, you know. Yes, ma'am.
I have a quick question right now. During the playing of that piece, how many times, or were there any times where you felt like going down the wrong street, or there was nothing there, so you sort of filled in until you got your bearings back? I mean, it has to happen. So in that piece, was there any of that going on? Like, you felt like, oh, this isn't right, or I don't know where I'm going, I'm going to wait a minute and then get back in track. You know what I'm saying?
I didn't have any kind of feelings like that, like you described. I mean, the material was in such a kind of specific space. I didn't feel like I made any wrong turns. I just did. That's not the way you go about it. It's like you're wondering if you're making wrong turns or.
But you're losing, like you're walking down the street and forget where you're going, that kind of thing. And then
well, if you're playing music and you feel like that, you can't be trusted to play anything. It's kind of like having Tourette's or something, you know. Like it's just like, you know, like if you play music professionally, you can be trusted to kind of keep your train of thought, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, if you can't do that, then you're either a free improviser or you play a lot of your own gigs and not other people's.
Yeah, right. You may be saying that to you as a listener, maybe there were moments that sounded that way, but I don't think that's necessarily the way we experienced it, because that piece in particular, the idea is to have spaces. So if it sounded like sometimes there was a space, that's exactly what I like on that piece, so that's okay. You know? It's kind of the idea is to have a different thing rather than trying to fill it up all the time. Yes, ma'am.
There was a certain period when you were completely synchronous, and before that you had called out some numbers.
Oh, this is real music appreciation stuff. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's the tune that I wrote. That's the written tune that I wrote.
He just counted off the tempo. That's what.
Remember, I said I wrote a tune based on the scale of melodic lines.
But you were already in and you called out some numbers, and then it seemed that you, although you had not played this together before, right? You were out. There was.
He's got it in front of him on his laptop. He's looking at the music. No, he's looking at the music. I will tell you a good rule of thumb. This is music appreciation stuff. Anytime you hear two improvising musicians play exactly the same thing at the same time, that's the part that's not improvised. But I mention that because it seems obvious, but even that people don't. That's the part that's not improvised. Because I mention that because now that you heard it, it sounds obvious, but it's not always obvious to people until you point that out to them. If they're playing the same thing at the same time, I mean, 1 or 2 notes maybe, but a whole melodic line, that's the part that's not improvised. That's the part that's been rehearsed or been prepared some way in advance. Yes, sir.
So that piece was, I mean, just that line and that bass line.
That's all. And even the bass line is kind of optional. It's really just the starting. Though it does imply, as I say, a scale to play on. But we treated that very freely.
But the rest was complete improvisation within that scale.
Not even within the scale, because we went outside the scale when we felt like it. But using the scale as kind of a home base to come back to, I guess I would say it that way. Or you could just improvise on the scale if you were more traditional in your approach, you know.
Notice there's somebody asking a question.
Yes, sir.
Right. Was there a form to that song, or did it go
now, when you say a form, just want to be sure, are you a musician yourself? Yeah? Because not everyone will know what you mean. You mean is there a certain number of measures that it keeps repeating? No, not in this case.
But there is sometimes.
Think of it as a modal thing, where you just play as long as you want over this pedal point. It's more like that. You just play as long as you want over the mode. It's not really the idea that you have to come back to it at any particular time. That's why I had to count. Because otherwise it would have been prearranged after 8 measures we're going to come back to it. I didn't have to count, but I chose to count. You know, I wanted to be sure. You know, it really wasn't absolutely necessary because a lot of times I just started the tune, or he started the tune, and then we said, all right, let's do it now. Something else you were going to say?
But there could be a form, right? Either predetermined, or you could set a form during your playing.
You mean on this piece or on some other piece?
On any free.
Oh, yeah, free. I don't know.
Well, we haven't played any free for a while. I mean, but you know.
Yeah, only that first piece.
You know, there isn't. If you want to talk about form in a piece like we just played, I mean, there's really only one chordal sound. It's like, okay, so what's the form? The form is we play that one chordal sound.
Right.
Like a more standard tune has more chords, and then you're more thinking about form.
Right.
This is more like a vamp.
Yeah, like a vamp.
It's more like a vamp, like a, I don't know, a vampy thing. It was just a vampy thing.
Yeah. That's what it means by a vamp.
So there's really not that much form to make on it.
A vamp is where you just kind of stay in one thing. Like there's no expression.
Like a dirge or something.
It means you're doing this and wait till the singer comes in. Okay, I'm waiting for you to start your song. What did you say? I'm sorry.
Nothing important.
But so that's usually not going to happen unless it's predetermined. Unless you agree in advance. Okay, every 12 measures we're going to do this. It's usually not going to happen. Now another thing you sent me of your own is something called Blinky.
We don't have to play that.
Oh, you don't want to? You mean you don't want to?
Let's play something more familiar.
All right. I mean, we could play that blues. We could play Giant Steps, or we could play something else that's more familiar. He's a psychologist. Don't forget.
Funny that you say that, because Blinky was written for a film about the rights of, you know, kind of people that were institutionalized into mental institutions. And what was interesting, well, I never finished this job, but I started it. But Blinky refers to a woman who was talking very passionately about, like, you know, like they held her down and they strapped her up and how inhumane it was. But then later in the film it came out that she was like biting people and stuff.
Oh, she was.
So it was kind of like, you know.
So they had to do that.
So like when she talked, it was like really kind of like, yeah, you know, I understand that on a human rights level, but somehow her blink, she had this little nervous blink. It was kind of like, it almost felt like a tell. Like I could tell there's a little more information in there than like she's saying. Like she just happened to leave out the fact that she was biting the attendants. You know, so that I mean, we could try and play it.
Well, let's do a little of it and see what you think.
Well, I can start it. do you want to play now?
So my part on that is mostly written. Did you want to do something like Green Dolphin Street or something like that?
We can play that.
that was based on a popular song. Anybody know?
Green Dolphin Street.
Right.
And maybe you can answer my question.
Okay.
I probably, during about 50 years of listening to jazz,
Okay.
I think Green Dolphin Street is the one song I've heard played by more groups, more often than almost any other song. What really are the specifics that really turn on a jazz musician about that song?
What do you think? Do we like it, and why?
You know, I think there were memorable versions of it recorded by a lot of people. Coltrane, Miles. You know, I mean, some of these songs that like Miles played were not even really hip songs until they played them. You know, like Bye Bye Blackbird is not the hippest song before, you know, it's one of those kind of your father's mustache kind of tunes, you know. But, you know, I think people gravitate towards those songs, you know, because they've been reworked in some kind of way. Like Sonny Rollins used to do that a lot, you know, just take, you know,
yeah, sure.
You know, Surrey with the fringe on top and play on it, and all of a sudden, you know, people wanted to play on Surrey with the fringe on top. But that song it's actually a movie score. You know, it's a Bronislav Caper, one of those Hollywood composers. It wasn't really intended for that. Yeah. But you know, a lot of jazz guys used to go to the movies.
That's true.
Maybe they couldn't play in the movies, but you know, like I forget who it was that used to go to the movies with Lester Young. Like,
oh, really?
One of the cats that's still around used to go to the movies with Lester Young.
Right? I love that.
And you know, like Lester Young, you know, he wasn't going to play in the pit of a Broadway show. That wasn't done back then. So that was probably where he heard them first.
That's true.
You know.
But it's very true that a certain jazz musician like Miles Davis will bring a tune into the repertoire. But, oh, I like that, because he will find a cool way to play it. I mean, about this tune, I mean, I know I like playing on it for a number of reasons. One is that it has a lot of variety in its short form. So you have this part where you just have this going, and over that you can do pretty much anything, because it's over a pedal point. Even in Bach, you have stuff at the end of the first, the prelude in the Well-Tempered Clavier. You know, he has a probably, you know, something like that. So you can kind of do anything over there, and then all of a sudden it starts moving. So you have that challenge to keep up with those chords. And so it's a challenge. On the other hand, not so much of a challenge that you feel like you can't do something with it. So I don't know. I do. I love it. You know, I like playing with it. Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering about the role of emotion between the players, whether you find that you play better or differently with people that you like, whether you come to like people that you perform well with, or whether that has interpersonal emotion has anything to do with the kind of music that you make and the kind of experience that you.
That's a good question.
I think a lot of people that sound good together don't like each other. I mean, I noticed Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. They didn't really like each other.
Is that true?
Oh yeah, they fought.
They're very different. They seem very different on stage.
A lot of the Ellington musicians really didn't like each other. Like Cat Anderson and Cootie Williams, they really did not like each other.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when I was in the band, I heard about like one of them trying to choke the other in his sleep.
Oh my God, is that right?
You know, like stuff like that. You know, you don't have to like somebody to play with them. You know, it's a bigger issue that you don't like the way somebody plays.
That's true.
That's really, you know, there's a lot of people I like playing with who I don't like.
That's interesting.
So you can trust them, you can be comfortable with them without, even when there's hostility between you.
Sometimes, you know, sometimes a little hostility can be a good thing. You know, like, I mean, I know, like, just, you know, there were eras of the New York Philharmonic that I would go to hear them where I could tell they weren't really liking what was happening, like in the Pierre Boulez era. And they didn't really it didn't feel so good, but sounded okay.
The orchestra, yeah.
You know, it's just it's a job. You know what I mean? Even if you're improvising, it's still a job. You know, and you can do that job, and you don't have to like the person next to you. There's always drama in big bands. Right. Big bands, there's always like somebody that don't like somebody. Every big band I've ever been in, there's always some kind of personal. Somebody's about to kick somebody's ass. You know? So maybe that's not so important. Maybe not.
That's great. So in other words, there's off stage and there's on stage. And there's something in there. I just want to elaborate on what he said. The idea that it's a job. I mean, one of the biggest canards that musicians tell all the times, they say that when I get up on stage, I play so different from one day to the next. You can tell whether I had a bad day or a good day. But the truth is, I think, Don, that you listen to 2 takes of Dexter Gordon from two different nights at the Vanguard or whatever. It's very consistent, and that in fact what happens when you get up on the stage is you more or less forget all that other stuff, and because you're so involved in what you're playing. Let's put it this way: that what ideally should happen is you should forget. And you should be so involved in what you're playing that you're not thinking, I can't believe I didn't get my rebate check from the IRS yet. If that's what you're thinking about all the time you're playing, then you're distracted. So you can get distracted by things. And you can't even get distracted if there's a bad interaction with somebody just before you start to play. That can be distracting. But for me, in terms of interpersonal stuff, the only stuff that bothers me when I'm playing is if there's a bad interaction happening while I'm playing. And that may not be what you mean, but that does bug me. And that does bug me. I mean, there'll be, in the middle of a tune, there's a guy I've played with sometimes who will, just give me a look like, what was that? And it's very distracting, Sometimes we'll have words after the concert, why that's not the time to do it or whatever. So if it happens while you're playing, that's another story, maybe.
But on the other hand, if 2 people really are connected, like say John and Alice Coltrane, that can really enhance their music. I mean, good collaborations.
John and McCoy Tanya too. You don't have to be married to each other to have that connection. But
so
yeah.
It's not necessarily negative, but it can definitely be a positive enhancement.
I think so. Yeah.
Well,
I think so.
Well, you're going to have to spend, if you're in a band with somebody, spend a lot of time with them. Like maybe, and a different kind of time, especially when you're traveling, it's a different kind of time that even you might spend with your family. So, whether you like somebody or you don't like someone, if you travel with them and you really get to know their kinks, it's a different level of knowing somebody whether you like them or not, and you do get comfortable with things,
right?
And maybe that does contribute to a group sound somewhat, but that's more at a level that's less conscious, I would say.
Right. Now, this time I'm not going to tell them the name of the tune because I don't want them to yell, but we wanted to hear that. These are 2 tunes that we were thinking of playing. Maybe those could be our last 2. We have which one?
Let's just play the first one.
Play the first one?
Play the first one.
Okay. I tricked the audience that time. Should we tell them what it is or see? How many of you are jazz fans generally? We're not going to tell you what this is. You may know it. That's our last number for tonight. We'll take a few more questions. And who knows what that was?
Was that Monk's theme?
No, good guess. Monk is a good guess.
Right.
It's Giant Steps by Coltrane. Yes, sir.
I've heard, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that Train specifically wrote that because the fingering was so difficult, and it's sort of a workout for him. But I was curious if you know if that's true, but also how different that is to play on clarinet and saxophone.
Oh, okay. I'll just say quickly about the first part. Not specifically because the fingering is so difficult, just that there are hard chords to negotiate, and it's a jazz version of an etude. You know, it's the idea of finding chords that are really a challenge to get through, you know, and they move quickly too. And what about clarinet versus sax on that tune?
At this point, I don't really think that way about it. I mean, you know, I've spent a lot of time being able to play things like that on clarinet. Those kind of chord changes are maybe a little more difficult to play on clarinet than some of the other woodwinds, but, you know, not in a prohibitive way.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I have a question for Don. I noticed that your swing is like, it's really different from other people's swing that I've heard. It's like more sort of legato, and you know, it feels like there's more air in it in a way. And I don't know I don't know if you're conscious of that, but.
Well, I don't know exactly what you're saying, but you know, I listen to a lot of Lester Young and Wayne Shorter and Eddie Harris, and I think I'm in that line of approach, which maybe you could describe those ways of playing swing kind of similarly. So,
is that at all influenced by the fact that? Did you start on clarinet, or is that at all an impact on that?
Well, I mean, you know, maybe what you're talking about is the way that the swing is articulated, and I think a lot of people use articulation to kind of speed their technique along and can't play eighth notes without articulating some kind of way tonguing. One of my heroes is Gary Bartz, who really didn't. You know, everything that he did was in his fingers. It wasn't like he had a tricky articulation that swang more than another way. Like if he sounded straight eighty, it was because he was fingering straight eighths. If he sounded swingy, it was because he was fingering swingy. There wasn't any outside device in getting his playing to move along that was involved. So I guess, you know, at the technical place that I am now, I think earlier in my career, I really focused on those kind of bebop articulations that people were playing on saxophone and tried to put them on a clarinet. And I think in recent times I've gotten more into something a little smoother.
Interesting. Yeah. And you were playing alto when I first met you, I remember.
Maybe a little. I was mostly playing baritone and clarinet.
Okay, baritone and clarinet. What was I going to say? Something about that.
Question.
Yes.
Yeah, just to refresh my memory, I know I first became aware of your excellence when you were getting in with your klezmer stuff. But could you refresh my memory about what was the group that you were with when you got the most early publicity in that?
Well, I had a group.
I know you were with several, but there was one that
mine was probably the Mickey Katz project that I did. Was probably it.
It wasn't. Well, maybe it was.
You're thinking of when he was a student at New Orleans Conservatory. When he was a student at New Orleans Conservatory, he played what they call the Conservatory Klezmer. Oh, Klezmer Conservatory.
Klezmer Conservatory. Yeah.
And that's probably what you're thinking of. Which always confused people who they thought there was a Klezmer Conservatory. It probably should be, yeah. But personally, I love Don Byron. I think he's a great person and a great musician. And I appreciate your coming. Just so you know, I've two already planned for the fall in September. My guest will be percussionist David King from the Bad Plus. He's a wild man. I love him. And I love all the guys in that band. And though Ethan's my better friend, but David is the one I'm being. And in December, the famous Bella Fleck is going to join me on his banjo. So we've got some good stuff. And then in the spring semester, we'll have some other things. Because I'm a college professor, everything's semesters for me. And thank you.
Further information about our programs and a complete archive of past Philip Tades events is available at philiptades.org.